Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. Today I'm joined by Dan Ramsden, who's head of performance at Hull KR. Dan, pleasure to have you with us, especially after all the success and in the lead up to the important Challenge Cup this weekend as well.
Yeah, great to be on the podcast. So thanks for the invite. Look forward to having a chat.
No, it's great. And I suppose for those that may not be as familiar with yourself, it'd be great to get a little bit more about your background, how you come to your current journey, being one of the most successful teams in Super League history, being head of performance there. So it'd be great to hear about your journey from where you started to where you are now, please.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I'm originally from York. So I'm a physio by trade, which is probably slightly unusual in rugby league, especially Super League, to move into the role that I'm in at the moment. So I qualified in 2010 for the University of Huddersfield. And to be honest, I wasn't really a big fan of a lot of the physio I was doing at the time in regards to working in hospitals, on wards and things. But then I had a really good relationship with one of my lecturers, and he got me in at Leeds Rhinos for my final placement, really. And that sort of opened my eyes to working in professional sport, and also that expanded role of physio. And like ever since then, I've been hooked really on sports performance, like developing players, developing athletes, and with rugby league as well. Coming from York at the time, rugby league wasn't a big thing. A lot of the base in schools was around rugby union, so I didn't know much about the game at all at the start. As soon as I started getting involved in that club, it opened my eyes to the sport. So from there, pretty
Nice.
much, I stuck around for around about a year. So 2010 was a really difficult time for physio and getting jobs. There was no jobs whatsoever anywhere, and there was so many physios about trying to get these opportunities. So some of the physios I worked with at Leeds, like David Sullivan, Mike Jones, they were outstanding with regards to wanting to develop themselves, wanting to develop other people, and their offering in physio. So I stuck around there for around about a year. So I could probably call that like an internship. And then got a job for Dave's private practice, Pro Sport Physio. And then he introduced me to Martin Higgins, who was a great mentor for me at the time. From there, from probably a sport point of view, I started working at York City Knights. So hometown club, and now in the Super League, so that's good to see. So I did a year there, and I got offered the head physio job at Bradford Bulls, so when they were still Super League at the time. So that was scary at the time, like fairly newly qualified. I had plenty of support around me, but getting thrown into that role was a massive learning point for me really. So obviously dealing with players, like working full time in sport with that level of experience was challenging, but looking back now, like the development that gave me was sensational really, like problem solving, like dealing with issues. Yeah, exactly. So then pretty much after 3 years, moved over to Hull KR. So when Jeremy Peacock moved over, I came in at the same time as him, and then worked there as head physio for 8 years. And then when Willie Peters came into the role, after a few months of working with him, he sent me a news article of a physio I used to work with had taken the head of performance job at West Tigers. Pretty much just said under the message, like, what do you think about this? Do you fancy doing this with us? And it's pretty much come from there, really. So 3 years into that now, that new challenge, which is it has been a challenge, but it's been great with the outcome we've had, really, with results and performance.
So I suppose, like, listening to your background, it's great just to hear that journey. Have you always been very heavy, like, into the rugby space, for example, or have you had any inspiration from other sports? I know you've mentioned, like, off topic, like, you competed or participated in other sports. Like, where's kind of like the interest in rugby come from, or is there other interests as well outside of rugby?
Yeah, so as a teenager, like early 20s, I competed in Aikido, which is a Japanese martial art. So I fought in a few world championships, won a few national titles with that. So that was probably my first like obsession with the sport. And that sort of got me into like the training side of stuff, and the physio side of stuff. And my initial like learning how to train came from one of my Aikido coaches. So how to load in the gym, how to train. Um, yeah, so really my passion was that. But obviously it's a really small sport. There's no funding. You can't make that from a career and from a like a performance coach point of view or a physio point of view.
Do,
Um,
do you feel that any of the learnings from that though is like translated into what you're currently doing now? Like even from culture perspective, leadership perspective, those kind of knowledge perspectives you've learned from that translated across?
Yeah, massively. Yeah. I think about this all the time. Like there's a lot of like, from a physio point of view, there's a lot of like joint manipulation in Aikido, like learning how the body works, how like people like respond to certain movements. So that when you're actually doing hands-on treatment stuff and you're looking at movement patterns of people, it's actually quite a lot of crossover. Um, so I always thought like my handling skills, it helped out with physio point of view, but looking at like how people move, how they respond to certain inputs, definitely. But also being part of a team, how to get people on side with you, how to get people working with you. Like there's so many different lessons from that,
Mm.
and even from the teaching side of Aikido as well. That obviously helps with. I've taught Aikido for a long time now, so that helps with like standing in front of a group of players, delivering to them, standing in front of a group of staff and delivering to them as well, um, which is definitely a skill. But the more and more you do it, the more you develop, the more you improve at that as well.
'Cause I suppose like coming on to like coach, 'cause it must have been a big shift going from physio to head of performance. Like, was there any kind of like personal kind of cultural shift you made when you transition, or was it very much like I'm going to stick to who I am, what I know, or did you have to adapt to become that head of performance in the last 3 years?
Yeah, it was a difficult change, and yeah, did adapt in it in certain ways. It was an interesting time for the club because so a couple of years before Paul Aikin had come in, the new CEO, um, and he really wanted to put his stamp on the place, and try and improve the club. So part of that was to create a new board to try and bring some financial stability and structure to the club. So he brought in a few many local like business people with which were able to support the club really well. So pretty much the story of me taking over the role was so pretty much the board said to me like what would be a gold standard like performance team like culture, and we pretty much had a conversation and it got down to them flying me over to Australia for a week. So I went around a few NRL clubs, went to Collingwood AFL as well, um, just to have a look pretty much what gold standard rugby league like performance team was. So went to Manly, West Tigers, Rabbitohs, mentioned Collingwood as well, looking at how their structure was set up, looking what worked for them from a head of performance point of view, but also from a holistic backroom staff as well. So I came back from that. I presented pretty much three models to the board. So the first was on the budget we had at the moment. So what the minimum standard would be to produce a successful like performance team. Sort of middle of the road one, which was an improvement from what we had at the time, and then like a gold standard, which was like pretty much whatever you could want or think of backroom staff wise, and like very grateful to them. They still then let's go with the gold standard one and work with that and see where we go from there. Really. So that was pretty much
So,
the setup of that.
so what does gold standard look like in your eyes? And now after the learnings taken from that Australia trip, what did you actually present to the board as gold standard for your department?
Um, so pretty much it was like breaking down into each area. So from S&C side, medical side, nutrition, data science. So trying to get someone or the best from each area to try and contribute their element to create like this that's a holistic backroom staff. Um, but one thing I did learn in that first year was that probably was too many staff, especially for rugby league. And we actually ended up whittling that down a little bit at the end of the first year. So we had a few issues regards to some people doing too much work, some sort of going under the radar and not really doing very much and not really contributing. And that sort of instilled a bit of a, what's the best way to put it? Some disagreements really from a commitment point of view to the club and the progress. So I reckon at the end of that first year, when we made a few little changes, that was when we were sort of humming really from moving into that second year. And obviously that's when we truly like sort of switched on the field and we felt like we were delivering what we needed to really to produce that treble winning team.
So, so how did that gold standard transition into adapting? 'Cause obviously, there's a big culture within like English rugby league versus potentially the Australian rugby league, for example. And while a gold model over there might, it sounds like it didn't necessarily fit yourselves. How did you then transition? That was a difficult process to go from. We're pretending this is a gold model. It's not working for us. We need to pivot, and this is how we adapt it accordingly.
Yeah. I reckon a lot of it comes down to the staff you have in place as well. Um, so the way I found it worked really well, looking at the strength and weakness of the staff that we've got in the place, and allowing them to sort of fit into a role that suits them, and that's how we sort of worked with the recruitment to start. Um, so I looked at the staff that I had in place originally, saw where their strengths and weaknesses were, and then obviously recruited around where the weaknesses would be. So that was one of the main factors really that I sort of went off from a recruitment point of view.
Yeah, cool. And I suppose like the big question really like that probably people listening to this might ask is then going from physiotherapy to head of performance now to it being proven to be a successful model within like your domain. Obviously, like you've had you had a record breaking season last season, you're at the Challenge Cup weekend final this weekend. So there's accolades to show that what you've done is working to help support the team. Yeah, what's kind of like been the underlying success from the performance and medical department that you guys have found to help you achieve that within rugby league in the UK?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yes, I'm very much of the opinion if you can keep your best players on the field, like you're going to be successful. Like if you look at teams across Super League, if they had their best starting 13 on the field every week, they'd be competing and they'd be successful. So my philosophy really regarding trying to achieve that is around intensity in training. So building a robust and durable player that can compete week in, week out in Super League. And that comes down to preseason. So training with intent, training with intensity. So when a player gets to the season, the games are easier for them and they're less taxing. So there are a couple of things they're the main things we focus on in preseason. So when we were unsuccessful as a club, I'd definitely say our training was less intense. We did a lot less contact in training. We trained a lot less. And I was probably always of the opinion, like as a physio, I was a little bit scared when we did contact in training. And I was probably a little bit scared when we ran at high speed in training as well. But the more I've been involved in this role now, the more I see the bigger picture of that as a preventative factor as well. So when Willie came in, we started doing a lot more intense training, a lot more contact, and our injuries actually reduced, both in training and in games. But the importance of that as well is being incremental with it. So it's not as if you can just throw a load of intensity and a load of contact at a player from day one. I think we've been very smart how we split up our training loads, how we split up our contact, especially throughout preseason and gradually building on those intensity metrics and the contact throughout preseason. And the same in season, trying to stay within the bands that we set week in, week out, be as consistent as we can with both our training volume and our intensity between games. and also our levels of contact as well. And it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. If you if you keep players like healthy, you keep them playing week in, week out, the team pretty much stays the same week in, week out. So players aren't playing out of position, players aren't playing next to people who are out of position, so they might have to make cover tackles. And it's sort of like, I find it rewards itself. So the longer you can stay healthy for as a squad, that tends to continue, like from my experience anyway. Like obviously rugby league, like the contact based nature of it, you're going to get injuries, so there's definitely luck involved there as well. But we think we probably do a good job of trying to mitigate as many of those injuries that we feel like we have some control over. Definitely.
Because I suppose as a performance and medical department, then you need to be continuously like evolving your practice and continuously like developing new knowledge to help that as well. Like you've said about trying to sit within certain thresholds and bands to like be consistent as well. What kind of you done as a club, and even you personally done to keep developing those kind of new thoughts? You talked about study visits out to Australia. What else from a professional development perspective have you been doing to try and help and innovate within this space?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm a big one for like always having like mentors or having people you can liaise and talk with really. Um, so since taking this role, I've had a close relationship with Paul Devlin. So he's been great bouncing ideas backwards and forwards of as well. And other coaches I've worked with across the years really. I suppose so. I'm doing a PhD as well, so that's been great with speaking to other practitioners. Not just about the PhD, but about the job role and performance in general. So I'm a big one for like speaking like across sports, across profession, really, just to try and like develop both personally and professionally. And I've always been one to like continuously want to get better. I suppose like my brain and my mood is always affected by like standing still. I always feel like I need to achieve like more and more each year. And each year, like I feel like I need to have a goal and a target to show that I'm like improving really. So that's probably led to like looking at my educational development. So I've obviously did my physio degree. Since then I've done a master's in sports medicine, I've done an MBA. Um, and then from more like specific medical point of view, I can prescribe, I can inject. And then at the moment, obviously, my PhD as well. So I've always, from an academic and a professional point of view, I was always wanting to try and like achieve more and more and continue to develop myself.
So, so I suppose when did you actually start the PhD then? Because obviously you've been through a lot of career transitions. When did you actually start the PhD as well then?
Yeah, a long time ago. So end of 2020, I actually started. Yeah, so doing it part time. So I'm in my final year now. So yeah, just trying to get it all
Nice.
wrapped up.
And before we get into like the weeds of the topic area and stuff like that, how you actually found balance in a PhD alongside like the full time role and also like a young family as well?
Yeah, yeah. It's been a challenge. It was definitely easier when I was in the head physio role. And if I was in the role I am now, there's no way I would have had access to the data that I was able to get in my first couple of years. So a lot of my original data was across multiple Super League clubs. And I suppose from a performance standpoint, there probably would have been a conflict of interest at that point. But yeah, with regards
So
to, like you said, like family always comes first. So I've got my kids are 6 and 8 now. So I love to spend time with them. So if you're trying to balance like your academic side, family, professional sport, and I've got private practice as well, physio wise. So there's a lot going on. So I've got to be smart how I balance my time.
so I think given all that, then like it's great to hear that you balance it. So what actually is the topic you talked about having to speak to multiple Super League clubs and stuff like that? So how did you come up with the idea? What is it you're doing? How did you come up with the idea, and what's kind of like the journey of the PhD so far? Because I mean, as recently as this summer, you were over at the UFC kind of presenting on it as well. So I think it'd be great for the listeners to get a little bit more of an understanding around that as well.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So thinking back to like 2020, so my PhD is based around like a holistic concussion assessment, pretty much. It's looking at like several factors that can influence symptoms post concussion. So the idea was so looking back like 2018, 2019, even prior to that, and you're looking at concussion management protocols. A lot of concussion management at return to play was based around cognitive function and using that as a marker for return to play. And I had several like players when I was early career, and you were sort of like they weren't responding normally. They weren't getting any better, pretty much. They were still symptomatic with regards to like headache, dizziness, that kind of thing. Um, and I was sort of like thought about the time like there must be more to this than just like relative rest, pretty much. So that sort of like sparked my interest in like trying to dive deeper into the topic. So like looking at things like autonomic function, the vestibular system, like psychological stress, like mental health. So trying to get a more of a holistic point of view on concussion assessment and management. So pretty much the aim of the PhD at the time was to look into each of these areas that might influence prolonged symptoms and try and find like the best assessment modality that would work in an applied like rugby league setting. So it might have a lack of funding. So the tests need to be cheap to do, simple to do, and easy to do as well. Um, and then either find a reliable test to use or develop one myself, determine the reliability of it, and then have a look at the outcomes at baseline in rugby league players and then post injury. That was pretty much the idea of the PhD, and then it's obviously developed over the past 5-6 years, and obviously, as you know, concussion management has anyway. Um, from the most recent concussion consensus, obviously, with the scope coming in, and a lot of those factors are now being assessed anyway. But I 100% think a lot of the stuff that I've looked at will be valuable. It's been valuable for us from a concussion management point of view. And yeah, I'm looking forward to really getting some of that data out when I get to the end of my PhD.
I was going to say, when is the end of the PhD? You said this year?
Yeah, this year.
All,
Hopefully,
all being
October.
well.
All being well, yeah. Yeah, October time.
So,
Yeah, so
so what's been one of like the key kind of you talked about the interests of the PhD, but what's the key kind of finding to you that not just from a academic perspective that you've been able to then take in there? You talked about different strategies, different management, but what's been some of the key things for you that you've gone, you know what, the PhD has really helped influence my practice, or has there been that moment as well?
yeah, definitely, yeah. Yeah, so one of the big areas that I've looked at is neck strength. So pretty much looking at so my first study really was determining the reliability of using the Kanga tech for like assessing neck strength in professional rugby league players. So the first study was determining the reliability of that, and then collecting baseline data on players, and then following them across a subsequent 2-year period and looking at concussion incidents across that time. So in that study, we had around about 150 Super League players across 5 teams. So I tested them pre-season, and then followed them for a year, retested them again, and then followed them for the second year. And I didn't actually find any link between neck strength, so peak neck strength, and concussion incidence. And one thing I did look at, which a lot of papers haven't, rather than just looking at time as for like incidence criteria, or exposure criteria even. So I literally looked at firstly it's a minutes, every minute a player played across those 2-year period, link that to neck strength and concussion incidence. But then we went into looking at like tackles and carries. So pretty much any time they could be involved in like a head acceleration event, pretty much, or some form of risk to sustain the concussion. Yeah, so with that, didn't really find anything. So that was sort of like, oh, that's weird, because there's a few papers that have, a few papers that haven't. So it probably led me to want to dive in a little bit deeper into neck strength. So then one of the next things I wanted to look at is sort of, you think when you take an impact or you take a carry or you tackle in a game of rugby league, like your neck has to contract at such a high rate. So you don't have that time to increase the contraction over time. So RFD was obviously the next thing I wanted to look at. So trying to devise a protocol which looked at rate of force development for neck strength. So that led to me creating a protocol, actually used the true strength for that. So hawking down the true strength. So I've created a protocol for that and did exactly the same again with regards to testing. We did this only with one squad. So obviously I was in the head of performance role here, so I only had control of my own players. So I tested them all pre-season with the RFD protocol, tested them mid-season and tested them end-season. In that year, we had really minimal concussions. So we didn't really get anything out of the incidence data, which is unfortunate. But one of the big findings that I did find was that how their scores increased across the season. So the second time we tested them, there was a massive increase in RFD of neck strength. So that sort of makes me think, like, when I was discussing, like, thinking about why this might be, is like playing games is probably a way of increasing like RFD of the neck. Because you think if someone's increasing the amount of contact they take week in, week out, they're probably going to get better at recruiting at speed. So when I think about it then, like, is doing contact training and playing rugby a risk reduction strategy for head and neck injuries, pretty much. So that's probably where my head's at the moment, with regards to why it's probably one side of practice which are trying to reduce head exposure events or trying to reduce contact in players. Is that necessarily, in a lot of cases, the best thing for these players moving forward? Obviously, mitigate it as much as we can, so we're reducing the risk of head exposure and head impacts. But can we sort of be more consistent with how they're exposed to that rather than just trying to remove it? Like the way like GPS was when it came in years and years ago, and how we probably use it nowadays with trying to maintain consistency week in, week out and across the season. Can we do that with contact exposure? And that probably is a preventative factor then for neck injuries and potentially for concussive injuries as well. I suppose that's where my head's at the moment, like coming towards the end of my PhD.
Because you mentioned as well earlier on when you were talking about the applied practice about how you progressively increase contact in training environment, like, and do you feel that's obviously influenced if you're doing more game-like activities within your practice? Would that potentially help with, like, again, a better RFD figure? Because I suppose it's very rare that people will look at RFD in neck strength and how to train it within I don't want to say closed environment, but it's like difficult to replicate what you're seeing in games from a neck perspective. Out there's
Yeah.
loads of experts currently exploring it in Premier League, rugby union, MMA and stuff like that. So yeah, it'd be good to hear kind of your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, probably where my head is at the moment is the best way to train it is by playing, or being exposed to contact. Yeah, you can do as much stuff you want in the gym, however you want to load your neck. Like, you can improve like your peak strength, peak force, like, quite easily, whether that's through isometrics or through like generic like loading, like training principles. But I think naturally my data shows, like, across the season, these factors increase. It has to be the exposure to playing, to tackling, receiving tackles. Yeah, and to be honest, and I think as well, it's difficult looking anecdotally at my experiences working in sports. Well, so our concussion incidence has reduced massively over the past 5 years, and that probably aligns with a few things. So it aligns with how we've improved on the field. Because when I first started the club, we got relegated, and then we've developed week in, week out, year in, year out. So we've got more successful as the years have gone on, and our concussion incidence has reduced year on year. I think if you're more dominant in the game, so you've got a more physical team, they're used to playing week in, week out, and they're probably a more competent team. They're less likely put the head in the wrong place when they tackle. They're more dominant in the game. They're probably less likely to get injured and to get concussed. So there's definitely that factor as well.
But
Yeah.
have you taken any of those findings into, like, is there anything that you're trying to look at with RFD outside of just simply doing more tackling, more game exposure, for example?
Yeah. So to be honest, developing it, not really, not yet. So that'll probably be the next stage, really, from a research point of view. Um, so yeah, it's pretty much just been because there's nothing I've come across with regards to like reliability or validating a protocol that assesses like RFD of the neck, or not one that's someone's sharing with others. So I've spoke to a few different people who work in different sports, like you said, like football, like Formula One. And there's a few that are doing like little things around the area, but no one seems to really opening up on how they do it or how they assess it. So I think that's ultimately the big thing now. Like if we get a protocol which like everyone's comfortable using, and we can pull data and nod data from different sources, different sports, I think that will really help with regards to if we can assess it properly, then we can truly know when we put an intervention in place if that's having an effect on it. So I think that's the next stage, really.
Yeah. I suppose, do you reckon, given you're going to finish the PhD this year, because it's, I suppose, like one of the journeys like a PhD goes through is like you do it to get a job. You're already in a job. You're already in like a high profile position. You've had experience elsewhere as well. Would you keep on researching, or would you, because you're in the head of performance role for a single club now, are you just going to go, well, I don't really want to share these findings? What's kind of like the journey for you moving forward? Is it keep researching, keep collaborating, both internally at the club and outside as well? And again, this is an opportunity to say that and to try and like offer that collaboration with people. But or is it going to be a case of no, we want to get ahead of this and really keep it internally as well?
Yeah, definitely. So it's something I want to continue to develop. Like I said before, I always want to be getting better in everything I can. Um, and yeah, definitely, I want to look into other sports, like collaborate with different people, like different people leading this area or interested in this area. So I'm always open to, like, massively open to chats with people who want to talk about how they're using it, how they want to use it. Um, yeah, more than happy to help people out, share my ideas as well. Um, yeah, so ultimately, looking at it from probably like my medical background is obviously I want to try and reduce, even performance point of view, I want to reduce the amount of like head injuries, concussive events to people across the board, not just at my club. So I think obviously it's going to improve the sport in general, and then obviously across multiple sports as well, really. Yeah, so yeah, definitely want to continue with the research point of view, and obviously that helps the club internally as well, whether from an R&D point of view, um, but also continuing to develop our players as well.
And if anyone is interested in collaborating with you, what's the best way to kind of reach out to you? Is it LinkedIn, email, or phone, or what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's good. Yeah, I'll hand out my email as well. So I'm more than happy for people to drop me an email. Yeah, so yeah, either of the two really. Yeah, any form of social media really.
Awesome, brilliant. Thank you, Dan. That was like I think we said before the call, this time's going to fly. Like we always aim for like a good conversation, but that was really insightful. So just wanted to thank you again for the time, and for any of the listeners that have tuned in, it like we'll share Dan's details after the podcast. But just want to take this time to thank Dan again for joining the call. Good luck for the Challenge Cup final on the weekend as well. And are there any closing comments or anything else that you want to share before we leave that?
No, just thanks for having me on board. It's been great to chat, and yeah, if anyone's interested in anything I've spoken about, yeah, please feel free to get in touch. Yeah, be keen to have a chat.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll look forward to hearing from you. And thank you for joining us next time as well.